All right, let's mic check 1, 2, just to make sure we're on. 10 minutes. Okay, perfect. All right, so I got to tell you, we'll give it about 2 more minutes and then I'll start the stream. All right, let's see here. All right, so we are on and live. I'm going to get another person in here and then we'll go from there. Hold on a second. Okay, good. So the audio seems to be good. It's ready. By the 3-minute mark, we're going to do an early start to this right now. Let's just make sure that everything is right on tact.
What happened? And it's like the hook goes, so with the
One more time. One more time. One more mic check, and then we're going to start at the 3-minute mark. One more time. One more time. One more mic check, and then we're going to start at the 3-minute mark. Okay, 20 seconds out. We are 20 seconds out, and we're going to start the show early. I know that I said I was going to do this at 10:30, but it doesn't hurt doing it right on 10:30. Okay, Lee Murray says, hey, Mike is working. All right, awesome. So I got to tell you, one of the reasons why I wanted to do a mixed martial arts podcast or combat sports podcast for that matter is just for the simple fact that I wanted to create something that I wanted to listen to. Now, obviously, everybody has their own different types of podcasts that they like to listen to. If, let's say, you have a niche for, let's say, hunting, or if you have a niche for, let's say, bull riding, or maybe car racing, or motorbike racing, or things of that nature, right? So these are the niche things that you want to listen to. Well, if you're into mixed martial arts, guess what? The majority of them, if you're talking about just a regular fight night, what they do is just break down the stats, the numbers, and then that's it. Sometimes to a very soulless endeavor. Now, it's not the worst idea in the world. However, I like to put a little more flair, emotion, and drama into it. Kind of like what you see in a movie in some sort of way. Now, you look at what happened in UFC 290 last week. That was nothing less than a movie. First of all, they had Donald Trump attending the UFC 290 card in Las Vegas. And by the way, Las Vegas was also the site of tonight's fight night with Holly Holmes versus Silva. But that's neither here or there. Now, Mel Gibson was also in the attendance during that fight. And why is that interesting? Because here you have a storyline with Dricus du Plessis at the moment where he's taken on Israel Adesanya, and the little beef they have going on deals with South Africa, the apartheid, racial issues that are going on around the world, and in particular, sometimes domestic racial issues that goes on in South Africa, to which, in Dricus du Plessis' defense and how he describes it, it is nothing to do with Izzy because he's not really from there. He doesn't breathe the same air as he does while actually living in Africa, but forgetting that there's racial implications behind it. So Mel Gibson was there. Did you guys remember that during Lethal Weapon 1 or 2 or 3 or something to that effect. Right below the comments, which lethal weapon came about with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover fighting a bunch of South African diplomats. If you guys can write on the comment section which lethal weapon that is, that's literally what UFC 290 reminded me of last week when Israel Adesanya walked into the cage and confronted none other than Dricus du Plessis, who, to everyone's surprise, came off with the win against Robert Whittaker. So why is that important? Because when you have moments like that, and you have fight events that happen in that kind of magnitude with the type of celebrities that they have, Lethal Weapon 2. Okay, thank you, Lee. So, yes, it is Lethal Weapon 2 where you had the South African diplomats, and they were the bad guys in that particular movie. Now, Israel Adesanya, being that he is the top star, the top draw of the sport of MMA, and in particular mixed martial arts in the UFC, one would assume that he's the good guy in this, right? Until he went off, started dropping N-bombs after N-bombs, and then before you know it, maybe Trump felt a little bit embarrassed while he was in a crowd. Dana White probably had to explain to him, hey, this is what's going on. That guy's from South Africa. He says he's not really from here. He says he's not really black or something to that effect. Obviously, I'm exaggerating with that because I'm sure it's not exactly what Dana White said. He gave him probably the most accurate information he can regarding the beef with these two. And then you had the situation with Pantoja where he won the 125 strap against Brendan Moreno. Now, why is that significant? Because after Pantoja won the belt, he said right on the microphone and into the camera, hey, Dad, are you still proud of me? Because the storyline behind that was that Pantoja had a dad in Brazil who left him and his parents for, let's say, a richer woman. And that now he has this redemption of feeling that he's the winner. He's got the attention of his dad, or I don't even know why he would want the attention of his dad if they abandoned him like that in the first place. But nonetheless, it was like an absolute tearjerker and emotional, just like a movie and just like a drama. Now, that's everything that you had going on with UFC 290 last week. And then on top of that, you had Volkanovski proclaiming himself to be the best 145er in the current division of the UFC, if not the entire sport of mixed martial arts right now. Because obviously in Bellator, you have the likes of Patrice Pitbull still at 145, but that's neither here or there. Now, the entire card of UFC 290, once again, like I said, was nothing less than a movie. It was like Lethal Weapon 2. It was like Boys in the Hood. It was like, what was that movie with Omar Epps and Michael Rappaport, where he played a Nazi in Columbia University in the Northeast? I believe that was called Higher Learning, right? That's what UFC 290 was like. Now, fast forward to this week. You have nothing more than just a regular fight night. And by the way, Jack Della Maddalena tonight had a split decision win against Hafiz, who was a UFC debutant. And of course, as you know, with the backstory with Jack Della Maddalena, he was supposed to fight in International Fight Week, which was none other than last week in UFC 290. But for one circumstances or another, he had an opponent pull out. So then he was already in Vegas. He had already traveled from the likes of Australia all the way there, so he didn't want to leave. And it sort of showed in his performance. Maybe his peak just kind of burnt out a little bit because, when you train for, let's say, a fight camp, 6 weeks or 12 weeks or something to that extent, there's a certain body peak that you're setting a goal towards. And, okay, I'm going to perform in this particular date. And then maybe to know that you didn't have your fight on July 8th kind of deflated you in some kind of way. And perhaps maybe that's a reason why he looked a little bit lackluster and barely won that fight tonight. But nonetheless, once again, it was like he went from getting a card into a big international fight week where there's Trump, there's Mel Gibson, there's all these different celebrities. There's Guy Fieri from one of these Food Network shows that was there. He's basically the American Gordon Ramsay, but probably a little bit nicer. And it's quite nice. He's a Sacramento guy too, but that's neither here or there. But nonetheless, it was kind of lackluster, right? You go from that to this. Well, to me, I kind of look at it like, you know what? Every fight matters, right? You ever seen the old tap out shirts back in the day where they said something to the effect of, my fight matters? Well, every fight matters. And you know what? I want to give some kind of flair to every fight every week. And what is the main event that you could take a look at this week? And I'm not talking about main event as in what was the headline with Holly Holmes and Silva and whatnot. And we'll get to that too. But how about the fact that Azaitar, one of these Moroccan fighters from the UFC, has this affiliation with none other than the King of Morocco. Now, I didn't know much about it. I heard about it going into the fight card, but I was thinking to myself, you know what? I thought, my goodness, this is a lackluster fight week, as they say, right? There's nothing going on. And then you have this story going on. I didn't really read too much into it. I just knew that I wanted to watch this fight today, and that I knew that the minute that this was going to be out there, this would make the fight even more interesting with Azaitar. Well, Azaitar lost tonight by TKO against Prado. And let's try to take a look at how he got to that situation tonight and his relationship with the King of Morocco. So let's read this right here. Okay, let's make sure that I got this up. Okay, so this is an article by none other than Kareem Zidane by Bloody Elbow, which, by the way, is a big MMA syndication of news and basically text news and things of that nature. So Kareem Zidane writes for them. So I'm going to read to you right here. After and I quote, after more than 2 years away from competition, Ottoman Azaitar returned to the octagon as part of the UFC 281 fight card of Madison Square Garden. And by the way, just full disclosure, this was back in May. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a context of what's going on here. Okay, so after 2 years away of competition, yada yada, flanked by his brother Abu Bakr Azaitar, as well as their father, the controversial Moroccan talent stepped into the cage opposite his American foe, Matt Pravella. If you guys remember that fight back in the days with Matt Pravella, while the Moroccan national anthem rang through the arena. Okay, so I didn't know that that was going on during the MSG card with Azaitar. So the matchup was originally scheduled to take place at UFC 257 in September of 21, but was canceled when Azaitar was caught sneaking an unknown person and items into the COVID-19 isolation bubble that was the UFC established in the UAE Yas Island. So as you guys remember, the UFC was the only game in town. Obviously, they did their first show in the pandemics in Jacksonville, and then Abu Dhabi and the UAE government came in and tried to facilitate the entire event for the remaining of that year. So yet, after years of anticipation, a fight was over in less than 3 minutes as Azaitar came charging in. Pravola countered with a three-punch combination that sent Azaitar tumbling to the canvas. And it was Azaitar's first loss, a defeat that one prominent Moroccan newspaper labeled humiliation, while Azaitar's defeat came as a blow to his legion of Moroccan fans looking to support their fellow countrymen. The loss had little effect on his status as one of the king's closest confidants. And of course, he lost tonight. It probably wouldn't change that much as well. Ottoman and his brother, Abu, have spent the last 5 years cultivating a friendship with the Moroccan kings Mohammed VI, an unlikely alliance that has elevated the UFC's fighter elite status, expanded their influence within their palace walls, emboldened them to build a controversial fast food empire. While blossoming friendship between the UFC fighters and a Moroccan king may seem absurd, a recent expose published by The Economist suggests that a crisis is brewing in Morocco and that the Azaitars may have very well have been a part of the problem. Okay, so moving on with that, the UFC fighters in the King's Palace. Born in French and Germany to parents who were immigrated from Morocco, the Azaitar brothers attended the King Fahd Academy, a controversial Islamic school funded by Saudi Arabia and suspected to attracting Islamists to Germany. Now, in 2003, the school was investigated for alleged ties to terrorist networks such as Al-Qaeda and fundamentalist groups. Okay, so this is getting really interesting. The same year, Abu and Omar Azaitar, then known as the brutal twins in the local media, appeared in a juvenile court to face charges of inflicting bodily harm and gang theft. Abu, who was 17 at the time, was accused of dosing a businessman in gasoline before stealing his Ferrari. He was announced in 2004 to 2 years and 3 months in prison. Released in 2006, but his issue with the law did not end there. Now, shortly following after release, Azaitar was accused of violently assaulting his girlfriend at a Christmas market and punching her repeatedly until her eardrum bursted. By 2007, Abu Azaitar had pivoted towards mixed martial arts and began training to make his debut in a local German scene. Meanwhile, he made friends with the local rappers and celebrities and reportedly associated with criminal clans. However, it was his unlikely friendship with King Mohammed VI that solidified the UFC fighter's celebrity status. Now, the friendship began somewhere in 2018, shortly after the king quietly divorced Princess Layla Salma, according to Moroccan media reports. King Mohammed VI was keen to meet with Abu and Ottoman because of their achievements in MMA. Abu was the first Moroccan national to sign with the UFC, while Ottoman had just claimed the Brave FC lightweight title and extended his unbeaten record to 10-0. Now, the brothers became frequent visitors of the king, who took them on vacations and later allowed them to renovate one of the unused palaces in Tangiers into none other than a sports club. As the Azaitar brothers' friendship with the king intensified, they began to take on more official roles with the Moroccan government. Okay, so that was an article by Karim Zidane back in May of 2023. So wasn't too long ago. Okay, and then another article that I found regarding this particular subject right here. It is this one. So let's share this one right here. Now, this one is from nyfights.com, written by Keeleen McNamara, sorry. Keeleen McNamara. Okay, so UFC 277 prediction, Azaitar, Prado, don't blink. This weekend, Holly Holmes and Mayra Buena Silva. And by the way, shout outs to Silva with her submission win tonight. Nobody would have expected that. And by the way, how about that, right? Just casually dropping in, saying the stats of tonight while talking about this wild story. Because let's face it, maybe this story in particular is a lot more interesting than, let's say, the fight card itself. But moving on, opinions on Sean Strickland toe being non-functional. Yeah, shout outs Gino Alpha. Opinions on Sean Strickland toe being non-functional. Okay, yeah. I don't think this is going to be about Sean Strickland, but let's see how that connects in some kind of way. All right, so let's see with this article right here. However, here we are here to offer our prediction for the third fight on the main card this weekend. Sleeper Azaitar, Prado, two unranked lightweights with a lot of talent to prove. Read below the predictions for this fight. Azaitar aiming to bounce back. Azaitar is heading into the fights into circumstances that he is not used to losing. In the most recent matchup in UFC 281, the Bulldozer got ran over by Matt Pravola in a violent knockout in the first round. Don't let this fool you. Matt Pravola is a very good fighter, one to which there is certainly no shame of losing. Azaitar is a very exciting fighter in all three of his UFC fights in the UFC, and he has not seen the second round in any of them. So, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of fighter he is. He's very violent, right? He approaches the game in that same kind of manner. And both facts of the name, blah, 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 despite his loss. Okay. See if there's anything about the king here. Okay, so there's nothing really about his situation with the King of Morocco or anything like that, right? So the thing is that you got to understand, with Morocco, right, they're not exactly a big mixed martial arts country. Now, are they a big kickboxing country? Yeah, obviously. They are huge into kickboxing and maybe have a little bit of some presence in, let's say, French boxing, right? But with MMA, not so much. So when the Azaitar brothers came into the scene, that really propelled some sort of interest to the Moroccan government, because you got to remember, these Arab governments right now, they're all competing for tourism, right? There was a hadith that was mentioned by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, during his prophethood and his time of revelation. He said that the end times won't come until the Arabs compete with each other to have the highest towers in the world. And lo and behold, what is happening right now? The Saudis, the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, all these guys that are ascribed as what would be considered the Arab lineage of the time of the Prophet Muhammad. Guess what? They're all now competing to have the highest buildings in the world. And you look at all the madness that's going on in the world, yada, yada, you kind of see the connection that goes into that. But nonetheless, what comes with that is these Arab governments and, let's say, the elements of sports washing, the elements of, let's say, building their tourism into an attraction for Western tourists and an attraction for tourists around the world, to see them as some sort of normal country that has been stigmatized over the years, and especially within the Bush Blair administration days of the War on Terror era, right? And of course, they want to create a better and positive image for the Middle East, but they also want to hide the crimes that they have done, like, let's say, killed a journalist of, let's say, Saudi Arabia, Khashoggi, if you guys are very familiar with that case. And by the way, a lot of people are wondering if Dana White is going to have this swift response against the Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou fight. Well, this is what I got to say to that. Look at Khashoggi. Because with Khashoggi, hold on, Prado causing the end of the Muslim world with this KO early stoppage. Well, look, Gino, I got to tell you, man, I don't think, one particular fight somehow reflects the end of one civilization or another. I think you would know that. I think you're just speaking out of banter and, just jokes and giggles on the side. But yeah, I could tell you it's probably a casual take if you really mean that, because I'll tell you what, I met Mikey Garcia, the boxer's cousin, one time, right? And when we had a conversation about race and boxing, one of the conversations we had was sort of regarded to how the fans react to the tribal matter at hand in the fight game. Whereas with the fighters, they just look at it as a business. They look at it as like, well, I'm trying to provide and feed my family and nothing more and nothing less. But with the fans, you got to understand it. It's a little more than that. There's a tribal matter at hand. And of course, people are going to try to correlate one to the other about, their guy winning or their guy losing, or, this says this about your people or this and that. But once again, just like with the article that, yeah, I know, just jokes, my man, I know, good man, I know. But just like what I mentioned with the article from Morocco when Azaitar took that loss, how did they sort of like cover it? The Moroccan journalists, they covered it in a way where like, oh, you lost or humiliated or this and that. Because you know what? Here's the thing. As tribal as people are, they want to roll with the winners at all times, right? And I remember Anthony Pettis, before he was in the UFC, this was his early WEC days. This is when Anthony Pettis appeared in the MTV show called Real Life. I'm a mixed martial arts fighter, which covered a lot of different people at the time. Frankie Edgar was on it. I believe Rampage was on it. Chuck Liddell was on it during his time. But the way that he approached people that came at him, like, oh, you're an MMA fighter. Yeah, I want to hang out with you or this and that. He was very shy and reluctant to want to hang out with these people. And the reason being is because he knew from the time on, and especially with a nickname like Showtime for Anthony Pettis, he knew that this was a very fickle crowd to deal with. And, MMA fans, and when I mean MMA fans, let me just clarify that. I would say the casual base of MMA fans, in reality, a lot of these guys, they're very fickle, just like rap fans. They're very fickle, right? Rap fans that are even hardcore, even more fickle. They're just going to ride with the new guy, because if you're my age or a little bit older, you remember back in the days when Ja Rule was running the rap world. And the next thing you know, you have this hip, fresh new guy. He has beef with 50 Cent. He starts calling him out, starts calling him names, has all these crazy jokes that he says about this guy goes into a different level of dissing that the other rappers won't go with other people. And now you want to hang with this guy. Now you want to be part of G Unit. You don't want to be part of Murder Inc. anymore. That's how the fight game is, right? So, yeah, man, it's a lot of pressure on Azaitar to deal with something like that. And then whatever it is that they're talking about with the crisis that's going on in Morocco right now, and they're saying that he's the one that's affecting it, that's sort of crazy to think about, that an MMA fighter can actually have that much influence in the kingdom in and of itself. Now, what's going on with that, right? I'm going to give you a couple of speculations. One of the speculations I can give you is probably that the Azaitar brothers, being that they grew up in Germany, right? Once again, the way that they describe it, very gangster, similar to Top Boy, similar to Boys in the Hood, right? These are Arab gangs that have ties to terrorism. So these guys can exert violence at a whole different level. Now, is it really that far-fetched to say that these guys coerced the king of Morocco? They sort of maybe saw the king as like, you know what? Maybe this guy is a bit of a wuss. Maybe we can take advantage of him. Maybe we can use this as some way to leverage whatever it is that we want to get out of Morocco, or get out of having this type of government that is backing us in any type of way. Now, you look at with Ramzan Kadyrov and Khamzat, it's a little bit of a different relationship. You can kind of see that Ramzan Kadyrov is not fazed by these guys. Oh, you guys are fighters, or you guys come from dangerous hood places in Europe. He doesn't see any of that. He's just like, whatever. You know what? I'm the leader of Chechnya. I run things here, and this is how it's going to go. And it's going to go so like that, to the point where Khamzat is going to pretend to get beat up by me and then make me look like the bigger, stronger person to the rest of the world. That's Ramzan Kadyrov in a nutshell. So not all Islamic dictators around the world are created equal, right? I mean, there are some that may take a softer stance, and perhaps maybe the way that the Azaitar brothers approached the King of Morocco was like, you know what? We're going to coerce this guy. We're going to blackmail him. Maybe we have something on him, so he's going to give us favors. He's going to make us rich because we're going to monopolize some sort of fast food chain that we're going to throw all around Morocco. And then you're going to help us with this, and you're going to hold jurisdictions on that, and you're going to write laws that's going to favor us so that we don't have to worry about these and this and that. So you got to think, if you were the Azaitar brothers, you would do the same thing. Like, what? You have access to a government, and they actually like you, and they can actually do things for you, which again is very similar to, let's say, the likes of Dennis Rodman. If you remember, he has this relationship going on with none other than the dictator of North Korea. Now, what's up with that? Does Dennis Rodman affect any type of world policy that is going on out there in the world in terms of how he conducts his friendship with Kim Jong-il? Or does that just mean absolutely nothing, and all of it is decompartmentalized, and they're boys when they're boys and they hang out, but when it comes to work and global affairs, that's what is going to be separated? Now, the way that these articles make it sound to be with Kareem Zidane, it doesn't really seem like any of that is separated. And once again, you got to understand, with Arab governments from around the world, nothing they do is ever separated with anything, right? There's no meritocracy to things. They hire their brothers, they hire their sisters or their cousins to be in roles of government, et cetera, et cetera. And guess what? It's not really any different in the American government. You look at Jared Kushner in the Trump administration, right? So there's some similarities in that effect. Nonetheless, what else can we take a look at with this fight card tonight? So let's see here. We had Tucker Lutz losing to a decision against Melsik Bogasarian, and then you had Victoria Dudvavoka getting a TKO knockout against Izatelia Nunes. Then you had Austin Lingo losing to Melquez Acosta by decision. Evan Elder getting a decision over Genaro Valdez. Tyson Nam losing to Azad Maksum. Alex Munoz of Team Alpha Male out here in Sacramento gets a decision win. And then Ashley Evans Smith takes a loss against Aileen Perez. So what I found fascinating about that particular fight with Ashley Evans Smith. After that fight, I noticed that Perez came up to Ashley Evans Smith almost in a way of like comforting her in some kind of matter. The reason why I thought that was significant to bring up is because you got to understand, right? In the brutality of this sport and the way that everything is shown, everything that is not shown, I thought that was really interesting that they showed that, or at least a glimpse of it. And in the glimpse of it that I saw, I just took matters into my own hands and interpreting it to what it is. So my interpretation of that was she was trying to tell Ashley Evans Smith, like, hey, look, you fought hard. You came here, don't give up. The whole cliche that they always say in every post fight, oh, you did a great job, you did great, or you did that, you're going to come back and get them next time, or I feel sorry for your next opponent because you hit me really hard. I mean, look, I'm not saying that's hearsay or nearsay or whatever. These things, fighters do say after the fight. There is some validity to that, there is some sincerity to that, but nonetheless, the reality of it is, look, let's just be real, right? We're just trying to make each other feel better for the situation that we're in. Ashley Evans Smith, in-depth analysis of Perez's twerking. Yeah, how about that, right? I think kind of got DC in trouble there for a bit, right? Yeah, I'm not going to do an analysis on that. I'm not that kind of channel to really do that. Oh, but it is interesting. And look, from a business point of view, hey, look, it doesn't hurt your brand in any kind of way, right? You kind of show something that's a little bit different. But I wanted to talk about Ashley Evans Smith from an analysis point of view, right? So I know that she's from Southern California, and interestingly enough, I had a friend who worked with her. None other than Eric Trilogy. If you guys know, Eric Trilogy is a guy that I've trained with during the Team Alpha Male days when he was here working with Misha Tate. And he also worked with Ashley Evans Smith. Ashley Evans Smith is from Southern California. I was just at Southern California, and I just wanted to tell you a little interesting thing that I found out about the culture down there, right? Which, if I haven't known already, I've felt while I was visiting down there. The type of culture they have in Southern California, in which Ashley Evans Smith grew up in, is sort of like a show me type of culture, a show off type of culture. Hey, look what I can do. Look what I'm able to do. Look at my athletic ability. Look at my body. Look at the vanity that I'm able to provide for the world and this and that. That's LA in a nutshell. And that's where Ashley Evans Smith grew up. And that's where I was just at. And the way that I kind of analyze this type of fight environment is two things. Number one, it can either be extremely distracting, or number two, it can motivate you to do better than everyone else. Now, when I was down there, I was in Santa Monica Beach. I was walking around, let's say, that little workout area that they have where they have the swings, they have, the ropes, they have the 25-foot rope in which you saw in my social media. I went and climbed, right? I mean, that's what people do there. They go out and they show off and they show out. Right, if you remember, White Men Can't Jump, the original one, not the one with Hulu, but the one with Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson. This is what guys have been doing in Venice Beach and Santa Monica. That's what they do. They show off. Like, hey, look what I can do in a basketball court. Look what I can do in a bodybuilding gym. Look what I can do when there's a punching bag around. Look what I can do when I do these grappling challenges. Let me see if I can grapple someone or submit them, and then they win $1,000, or these little YouTube videos that you guys see people do. But nonetheless, that's what LA is in a nutshell. But at the same time, it can also be very distracting, and I think that the type of environment that Ashley Evans Smith grew up in, I just don't think it was very conducive for her as a fighter. Now, for other people, let's say if you're like Floyd Mayweather, maybe that would motivate the living heck out of you, right? Because you're like saying to yourself, you know what? This is the show me state. This is the show off capital of California. So I got to show everybody what I can do. And it's going to motivate you. And sometimes you want to go into gyms where you feel motivated when everybody feels like they are the shiznet, where you feel like, oh, you know what? I'm the best guy in here. And that's kind of what I got when I trained at Team Alpha Male. I felt like, man, everybody in here wanted to go out and prove that they were the best guy. A couple of guys have egos or this and that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for some people, that's sort of kind of demotivating. But for other people, it's motivating because you want to prove the other guy wrong. So I guess that's my little rant on why certain environments are either good for you or not, especially when you come from a big city of like LA, London, Miami, New York, this big city feel. And not only that, it kind of creates and gives you a little bit of a depth of a personality that's very sellable. You notice a lot of guys that come from, let's say, the mountains, or people that come from the Midwest or something like that. It's very difficult to have these types of people be marketed out there as some sort of fan friendly type of product that they could sell to the world, like somebody like Patty. But then on the other side of that, sometimes they just don't deliver with the type of I guess the type of hype that that they have. It doesn't match the reality of their skills. But nonetheless, what a great night of fights that we had tonight, even for a fight night. It was a lot of decisions, a few good finishes, a shocking finish at the end. I really thought that Holly Holmes was going to get this one, only because of the fact that, like, I don't know, they're talking about Ronda Rousey coming back, right? And I said to myself, if there's a person that they're going to bring back to fight Ronda Rousey, it would be none other than Holly Holmes. Well, why is that? Because let's face it, this is in 2015, right? Ronda Rousey, she's 36 years old right now, but Holly Holmes is 41 years old. And you got to think, listen, guys, peaking is sometimes very important, right? Because there were times where Donald Cerrone lost maybe a couple of fights to Ben Henderson, right? And then in their last fight that they had together, Ben was a little bit older. He was coming off of some losses here and there. And then lo and behold, I think it was a trilogy, or was it a rematch that Ben Henderson and Donald Cerrone had. What happened? Donald Cerrone won because it was at the right place at the right time. Same thing with Tito Ortiz when he beat Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell already beat Tito Ortiz once or a few times already, and now they went into this Oscar De La Hoya mixed martial arts Golden Boy card, and he finally was able to beat him at that stage, because even with the losses that Tito took from Chuck Liddell, it just seemed like in the latter stages of Tito's career, he was still looking good. He was still looking competitive. And people forget Ryan Bader lost to Tito Ortiz while Ryan Bader was in his UFC prime. And then you've seen what happened with Ryan Bader. He went on to become somewhat of a double champion in Bellator, light heavyweight and heavyweight champion at that. But nonetheless, man, that's what the UFC has planned for Ronda Rousey. And is Ronda Rousey ready to come back in MMA after all these years of being in the WWE? Listen, these are one of the things that only she knows. But here's something that you do know about her, is that, number one, the 135 division right now that Amanda is gone, it's quite boring. It's quite stale. There's really nobody there that they could sell. And then bringing her back would just bring a boost into that particular void of that particular roster in the UFC, which is none other than the 135 women's division, maybe even 145. Maybe she wants to go up to that weight class because, as you know, the 145 division in the women's weight class in the UFC is almost non-existent, only because they made that so that Amanda Nunes can have some sort of second belt of some sort, and then they just ended up retiring the belt. But Jack Della Maddalena had this close fight with Hafez. We talked about that. And then you had Ottoman Azaitar getting finished by Francisco Prado, which, I mean, look, it doesn't surprise me, but you got to understand. I know that people are going to say, well, Ottoman Azaitar is not really in this level or this and that. Fair enough. You got to understand, he comes from, the German mixed martial arts school of thought, right? what do you know about mixed martial arts in Germany? Maybe underdeveloped in comparison to the Russians and the Americans and the Japanese and especially the Brazilians. But nonetheless, he still has a lot to learn. This is a sport where people do forgive other people for losing, and guess what, man? It's a theater of the unknown. If he loses now or he loses again, maybe he'll get back on a winning streak, and then before you know it, becomes somebody like Robbie Lawler, somebody like Jorge Masvidal, somebody like who won with multiple losses in her records or something like that. Chael Sonnen was a guy similar to that, right? This is a different sport. It's not like boxing. And speaking of boxing, how about the Francis Ngannou fight with Tyson Fury? Now that's signed, sealed, and delivered. Now it's a reality. It's actually something that we can really talk about and not deny anymore. And then Anthony Joshua with his fight against Dylan White. I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. What else do we have? We have Daniel Dubois taking on Alexander Usyk. So you see that even with all this, right? And I'm gonna hit on boxing for just a little bit here. Even with all this, you kind of see that a lot of things had shifted around because what was the main thing that we all really wanted to see, right? Probably Usyk and Tyson Fury, but the Francis Ngannou fight isn't really that bad either. The reason why it's not that bad is because you got to think to yourself, right? Francis Ngannou is the lineal champion of the UFC. And then what you have out of Tyson Fury is none other than the lineal boxing champion, right? And now they're stepping in a boxing ring because why? Let's face it, is Tyson Fury the A side into this whole situation? Yeah, just like Floyd was the A side when we were dealing with, Conor McGregor. Uh, but just like the Conor McGregor and Tyson Fury fight, by the way, I see a lot of parallels in this. I'm probably going to do a side video on how Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury is exactly that of like Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather. Obviously, not the actual fight because we haven't seen the actual fight yet, but the build up to it. There's something similar to that that I'd really like to touch on, and it comes from this school of thought where Francis Ngannou is a knockout artist, just like Conor McGregor was a knockout artist. Although one can argue that one is different to the other. One guy's knockout is based on the fact that he catches guys while they're slipping as sort of like a counter fighter. Whereas with Francis Ngannou, he just has this hammer in his hands, and if he hits you once, it's just inevitable that you're going to go out. But how is that going to translate in boxing in terms of having smaller gloves? How will his power translate in relationship to the different types of defense that boxing has to offer, especially with gloves being bigger? So there's a lot to uncover with that. I'm probably going to do a video with that sometime in the future, and we'll see from there. I think that's about it with what I have for this particular live right now. I'm glad that the audio was working good. I'm glad that we had a good fight to watch tonight with Holly Holmes. Obviously, it was quite horrible that she wasn't able to get the win. But guess what, guys? That's why they call it the theater of the unknown, right? Because in this particular game, it's really not about your story. It's not about, oh, because you know what, you're friends with the king, or because you've had this big fight back in 2015 that the world knew about as some sort of like Buster Douglas type of win that Holly Holmes had. None of that matters. Once you walk into that cage and once you walk into that fight, all that matters by the end of it all is what you've trained and how prepared and how ready you are and how much BS you're willing to set aside in order for your mental clarity to give you the ultimate optimum flow state within your competition. But everything else is just the theater of the unknown. And that's why we enjoy these fights. Take care, guys.